Last year was kind of the fun year for Minnesota. Like, defied any and all expectations, get all the way to the conference finals, almost playing with house money last season. This year they come in with real expectations, championship level expectations. They bring the core of the team back intact. That was obviously smart to do for a team that good. Kyle Anderson's gone. Joe Ingles is in. They get a point guard of the future and Rob Dillingham, who knows how much he'll contribute, I guess, right away. This all felt like the right moves to make from the outside. What did you think of the offseason that the Wolves had?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Tim Connolly did a really good job of working with what was available to him. Because they are going to now, this roster becomes very expensive this season with contract extensions kicking in for Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. You have Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns both on max deals as well. For the first time in a long, long time, the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be a luxury tax paying team. That obviously limits some of their flexibility in terms of roster building around this core. And so they knew they were not going to be able to afford Kyle Anderson. He was an important part of what they did, but not like, I don't think it's a backbreaker that they did lose him. They went out and get Joe Ingles, but I thought that Connolly was really smart in being aggressive on draft night and going and adding the 8th overall pick out of nowhere. He basically pulled that rabbit out of his hat, gets Rob Dillingham. And one thing, Chris, that they missed in the Dallas series, they couldn't keep up offensively with Kyrie and Luka. Karl Anthony Towns struggled. Ant was kind of basically their only bucket getter. And so they needed someone else to be able to come in, create their own offense and score. And they think that Dillingham is going to be able to be that guy. He's small, he's a rookie, but they think over the course of the year, they can get him into filling that niche in this roster because they believe they have the defense. They believe they have so many of the other things that you need to be a finals contending team. They just needed a little more juice offensively, and Dillingham can certainly bring that. So they got him. They got Ingles as kind of a veteran, pseudo Kyle Anderson type of a player to help out. And then I think Terrence Shannon has a chance to actually do a little something for them, at the back end of the rotation, the 27th overall pick. So for the limited resources that they had available to them, they were pretty creative in going out and getting guys that I think can really help them. And so I thought it was a good offseason for them.
I love the Joe Ingles pseudo Kyle Anderson, like basically just describing like the kind of slow, really good playmaking wing, right? Like,
yeah, super smart, not athletic at all, but goes in, makes the passes, and Joe's a much better shooter than Kyle. Kyle's a much better defender than Joe, so there's a little bit of trade-off there. But yeah, like these are the older guys that are just going to get by on guts and guile and throwing an elbow into your ribs every once in a while. I think that's about the key to their success.
That's a great lane to have. Like my pal Brian Scalabrine could have fit in that lane from years ago, the pseudo-athletic thinker types. You mentioned Cat, and to me, he's the big wild card in terms of high-level success. I mean, he did get bullied in that Dallas series. I mean, overall, his numbers ticked down in the playoffs, but the Dallas series, he was 25%, I think, from 3-point range. And you're not going to win when your first or second best player, whatever you want to call him, is playing like that. I mean, is he kind of I'm thinking of him as the wild card. I'm thinking of him in his ability to get to that level they need a player like him to get at is probably going to be a difference maker for them in the playoffs. What do you think the expectations are on him going into the season?
Yeah, so I think that, we just talked about some of the additions that they had that may or may not help them, but I do think that what they have emphasized all summer long has been, if this team is going to take the next step, it's going to have to come from internal improvement. You're going to need Ant coming off the Olympics, and I'm sure we'll get to that, to take another step. I think Jaden McDaniels is a big key in taking another step himself, but Cat is absolutely in that conversation as well. He's going into his 10th season, so he's a firmly established veteran in this league. He played exceedingly well against Phoenix and against Denver to help them win those two series. They don't win those series, or they don't sweep the Suns without Cat playing the way that he did. They don't beat Denver without Cat playing as well as he did in that series. He clearly did not play well and did not shoot well against the Mavericks, and that was a key reason that they were bounced so easily. And so how he comes back off of his first real playoff success in his career, he'd only been a one and done in the playoffs a couple other times, is going to be enormous for them. He's making a bunch of money. He I thought has really improved his defense over the last couple of years. I think also sneakily, he's one of the guys that actually works with Rudy Gobert well. Like they jive, they have a good chemistry. He is a willing passer to Gobert. He has kind of done a lot to incorporate Rudy into this, and that's going to need to be continue. But also, I think he's going to have to do some introspection and look at what went well and what didn't in the playoffs, and how he can learn from that experience and go further. I mean, we've seen many examples over the years of NBA players, their first time in that bright spotlight, it not going well, and having to learn from that and bounce back from that. I do think that if they get into that situation again, there's a chance for him to have better success because he had that experience and he wants it so badly. Sometimes he wants it a little too badly. Sometimes he presses a little too much. And so if he can be more comfortable in those spots, having been there before, I think that'll be huge for the Wolves, because he is one of their few like knockdown 3-point shooters. And they need him to space the floor. If you're going to make that Cat Rudy combo work, Cat has to be a 40+% 3-point shooter and just give them a different element offensively. He's capable of that. He did that at some points, but he's got to do it in the biggest spots to make it financially feasible to keep this whole group together. There's a lot laying on it.
I do think you're right about the experience part of it. I think having that experience going to a conference finals is going to be a huge asset to him, just knowing kind of what it takes to get to that next level. And I wondered in that series against Dallas, like how much fatigue had set in with Cat. Like he missed the last chunk of the regular season with that injury, and going through the Western Conference, even if you sweep Phoenix, like it's tough. It's tough to succeed at that level. And I thought he settled a lot in at least the first few games of that Dallas series. I remember I think you were sitting near me in Game 4 when he's just like, it seemed like in Game 4 when he had that stretch when he went to the basket every time, it was like a big fuck you to all the media that said to stop shooting threes and all that. So like more of that, I think is all that's really needed to help take him to another level. Just don't settle quite as much for the 3-point shot, because even though they need him shooting threes, right? They need him floor spacing. He can't just be that for them. He's got to be a little bit of a post player, a little bit of an aggressive guy going to the basket.
Yeah, and I think like you're spot on about the fatigue part. I do know he was playing with it. Then that knee was bothering him, so he was a little bit limited. But I think one thing I noticed, big picture from Cat, Naz Reid talked about it, Ant talked about it after the series was over. They were totally out of gas. I think that they had the huge emotional win in Game 7 in Denver, coming back from 20 down. It was a remarkable game, dethroning the champs, and they I felt like there was a sense within the team when they won that game that they've arrived. They did it. They conquered the big obstacle that they were going to have, and now we're going right to the finals, and that's it. What they failed to realize, because so few of them had ever been there, is they were halfway through, Chris, the playoffs. They still had 2 more series to win. And I think that once they got to the Western Conference Finals, they did not have the rest that they had because of the 7-game series, and they just didn't have the emotional and the physical gas tank anywhere near full enough to go against a team that was playing just great basketball, and Kyrie and Luka were unbelievable in that series. And so that's part of the inexperience, is like when you get through 2 rounds, you haven't done anything yet, even though in the scope of the franchise, it's the best season that they've ever had, or one of the 2 best they've ever had. So that's part of that learning experience as well. And a lot of them talked about how they have to report to camp just even in much better shape, because the season is so much longer than any of them had ever gone before.
We know Rudy got cooked at the end by Luka. Draymond obviously thinks he sucks, but we gotta be past the can Rudy and Cat play together stuff, right? That was a great bounce back year for Rudy. Like he was phenomenal all season long. They got to the conference finals. Like, do you see any issues with kind of running that front court rotation back with those guys.
Yeah, no, I don't, Chris. And you're right. I mean, I thought the Draymond stuff was ridiculous. I think a lot of the discourse around Rudy is kind of absurd. He got laughed at because Jokic got him in the second round game, the one game. And then he got laughed at because Luka cooked him at the end in isolation. Just find me any big that is going to stay in front of Luka in that spot. No one, not Anthony Davis, maybe Bam, but I mean, no one does it. Like they cook everyone. So here's the simple fact of it. I think that as a team, um, Rudy is very accepted by Kat, by Ant, by Mike Conley, by the whole group understands finally. Like the first year, they didn't really see the real Rudy. He was banged up a little bit, and it was a kind of a struggle to get everyone on the same page and learn each other. And there were some people in there that were just like, man, how are we going to make this work? What's the key to this? In year two, there was a lot more compromise on both sides. Rudy was really healthy. He played great. He absolutely deserved Defensive Player of the Year. Like any of revisionist on this because Luka got him at the end is nonsense. But internally within the coaches and the team, there's a lot of trust in Rudy Gobert. What they're going to have to be able to block out is the external conversation around Rudy. I mean, he is a pincushion for the rest of the league. People love to make fun of Rudy Gobert because he's not aesthetically pleasing offensively, because he does drop a pass here and there, because he does miss shots and fumble a little bit. And people love to make fun of Cat as well for the things that he says on podcasts and stuff like that, for maybe a failure to break through in big spots. And so they have two of the guys who are the most criticized players in the league, and they have to just be able to block that out.